Live from Houston, Texas. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of What Makes You Tick. I'm really excited that you're here. And before we dive in, as always, just a few housekeeping notes to make this a great experience for everyone. Today, I'm super stoked. I've got an amazing guest, a good friend of mine, and I'm excited to connect this gentleman with all of you guys that are watching. So, before we get started, here are a few notes. Look, this is an interactive conversation, a live session. You're encouraged to participate, ask questions, and connect. If you hear a bunch of noise behind me, it's because they have a party. I'm actually on location, even though it doesn't look like it. I'm standing up. I'm giving all the energy I've got, and the guy I've got today is going to be amazing. If you have any questions for us, then please ask the question, and we will have a conversation about what you put up there if we can. We'll use LinkedIn DM and connect with the connections, the comment section of the events posting. Any behind the scenes coordination, please drop me a message and we'll get to that. If you get disconnected, LinkedIn will do this from time to time. Just occasionally, just log back on. Last, we know many of you are listening while commuting and working, so engage however you can. Even quiet and silent listeners are the best listeners that we can have. Thanks again for being here. Now let's get into it. Look, my guest today is a gentleman that I connected with several years ago at one of my
22.
first, if not the first, Cup of Joey events. We talked about everything, our family, our dreams. We talked all the time about different stuff. And about a year after we met, we're sitting in this round robin, this engaging conversation. And I look at him and go, dude, what do you do? We didn't even know what each other, and this is a networking group. Um, I have such great respect for this guy. This man has worked for nonprofits, family owned operations, global billion-dollar corporations. His career has included roles in the fields of engineering, manufacturing, operation, ministry, and is currently business development manager in sales for TLT Electronics. Regardless of his role in his industry, this guy has always had the goal to make sure the customer and I understand each other. Being connected, being on the same page is his goal. Finally, through through all of now, he's a business development manager and approaches this role like nobody else. Relationship development manager is what he really is. Business is the outcome. Relationships is the engine. Most of our investment, or is what we mostly invest in. Below, please welcome my friend and today's guest, Adrian Leal, to discuss what makes him tick. Adrian, great to have you on. Say something.
Hey, Bryan, it's been too long, brother. It's we have conversations, on the daily. Like, man, we need to capture this conversation because, we run into each other at different networking events. We run into each other at bingo night.
Uh huh.
We attend Rockets games together, and like we get a chance to talk. But then people want to talk to you. People want to talk to me. Like, man, we got to dedicate some time to ourselves. So I'm glad to be
and
here.
and it used to not be that way. It used to be where we could have a conversation. It's not like we're popular or anything. It's
Yeah.
just we've been around this group so long, and people know us, and we both have very engaging personalities that people love us. So give us a little bit of a story. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are.
So I'm from Houston. I'm actually a third generation Houstonian. I got into electronics. My dad was a he worked for GE. Actually started off fixing toasters, and then worked his way through the company. And when he retired, he was the regional manager for GE Health, in charge of all the extra installations, from like Beaumont, Port Arthur, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, down to Rio Grande Valley. Of course, being here in Houston, the majority of the work was
Mhm.
in the medical center. And I saw my dad. I saw him, successful. I thought electronics. I like to tinker. Matter of fact, when I was a little boy, my dad would bring home stuff from GE that no longer worked, and so everything from televisions to radios to record players. We're going to date
Mhm.
ourselves, right? And I remember one time he brought home a electric knife. It didn't work, so I took it apart and I put it on my full-size GI Joe and made him into a, you know. And then later on, I see this cartoon Transformers. I'm like, hey, wait a minute,
That's
I made that.
exactly what I was
And then,
thinking.
so I always like to tinker, but I'm also a people person, and so and like you said, I've always had the idea that whether you are in sales or not, the person who receives your service or product after you is
Yeah.
your customer.
Yeah.
So I've always had that mindset, and I try to keep in mind what their expectations are.
Hmm.
And so it was a natural progression. I was actually I was working for a company a while back, and a buddy of mine who I've known for years called me up and said, "Hey, I need somebody to represent the company down in Houston."
Hmm.
I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'll go into my network and see if I can find somebody." Because no, 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 I'm not asking you to find somebody. I'm asking you. And the first thing I thought, well, I'm not sales. He says, "No, you're not." He says, "But you are a problem solver. You have a good network. You know what it's like to be the customer. So I think you're a natural fit." So I did that for a while, and then lo and behold, one of my customers hired me, and then that customer, we got that employee, we got to capacity, and then I got hired by TLT at the time was Teltonica, but
Hmm.
we've now rebranded the manufacturing side as TLT, and so I've kind of like that this role has kind of manifested itself to be, to offer solutions to people who need the electronics. And because I've been in the operations side, I do know what it's like to engage a vendor or supplier who's going to provide you a manufacturing service. I can talk the shop. I can ask the right
Right.
questions. Sometimes it's a matter of educating the customer because they think they might have the best thing since sliced bread, and actually, we got to tweak it a little bit. So I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it.
No, and it's funny. You brought up, your buddy called you up and you said, I'm not sales, but basically that's what you do. And the funny thing is because, yeah, I mean, the platform based off of trust, clarity, and traction, that's what makes you tick. And it's my belief that trust and clarity are two big impactors. Your buddy, he didn't look at your resume. He knew who you were and he
Mm-hmm.
trusted you to do what needed to be done because you were trustworthy. In other words, you were built on look, gosh, I like when I'm sitting here listening to what you're telling me, going, that's a thing that I think we could do better as a society. It's like we've got so stuck on these electronic resumes that if you don't have the talent, or if you don't have as a matter of fact, I wrote an article that'll come out later this week on LinkedIn about one of the things I think we're missing is we're missing this. We're missing the engagement of the person
Mm-hmm.
versus looking at somebody's resume. If you don't look at me and you don't know me, then you're going to look past me, but I might be the perfect person for that job, just like you were for that. And now look at where you're going.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Yep.
And this, and one of the things for clarity, I know because we were talking before, so I want you to tell this story. We've talked at several different things. I want you to tell the story about Tres Leches at Luby's. You talk about
So,
clarity. Let's be
so yeah.
clear.
So years ago, my daughter, who's now 16, she was a baby, and we were going to Luby's, and it was a Sunday, and so Luby's, I standing in line, and there's this little old lady. Okay, so for the sake of the sake of the story, I have to tell you the ethnicity of everybody in the room. So the little old white lady in front of me, and she looks at the desserts, and she says, "Honey, what kind of dessert is that right there?" Behind the counter was an even older black woman, and she said, "Well, baby, that's 3 milk cake. That don't sound very delicious." Oh, honey, everybody here in this neighborhood, which was a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
everybody in this neighborhood, they buy it. They eat it all the time. You need to try that 3 milk cake. And so I'm holding my daughter, and I'm like, and I'm looking to see and then I realize what they're talking about. So I've got my daughter, and I'm laughing in the back of her, in her head. I'm shaking her, and so our group that went through after mass, they're like, "Adrian, what are we laughing at?" I'm like, three milk cake, fresh lettuce, three milk cake. It's like, oh, so the woman bought it.
But where does
She
the
ate
three
it.
milk? Okay, because I'm
So
sitting here and you're
fresh
telling where does the three
lettuce.
milk come from?
So fresh leches is three, literally means three milks. And so the black woman that worked there, she like, I can't say it, but I know it's three milks. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
so it was so cute because they were trying to, the woman working there was trying to communicate to the customer
yeah.
what this was, but literally the translation sounds kind of gross,
It
soggy
does.
milk, who wants, but you go to Ninfa's or you go to any restaurants around here, and they have desserts. You go to any of the panderias and tres leches, man,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't last long. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
growing up in South
now
Louisiana. Yeah, I wouldn't have
now
known any difference.
now I said that my daughter was a baby and now she's 16. I'll go to a Mexican restaurant and sit down and say, hey, what do you have on your dessert? Huh? You have three milk cake? Senora, ¿qué es three milk? Ah, sí. Yeah.
No, look, growing up in South Louisiana, one, I wouldn't have known what that was. But two, like we had that all the time because you had South Louisiana, North Louisiana, and you had a lot of different culture mix. And when you say Boudreaux and you got an X on the end, it just means something different than Boudreaux without the X on the end. And it's funny how that works. But
Yeah.
okay, so as we keep going, one of the things that one of the features I do usually early is I think books make it a big impact. And one of the books that I want to bring up today is called The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly. And it's a simple but powerful approach to leadership. And it's one of those things, we're part of the Cup of Joey group. By the way, go Tigers. If I hadn't said that yet, that's why I'm wearing purple in the hat. But if we haven't said that yet, Cup of Joey is based on purpose, and it's the one thing that's connected us. This book, as I was kind of going back through it to make my notes, was one of those books that with Find Your Why are the two things that really have kind of molded me over the last couple of years, because he talks about in the book, it's not just about the productivity, but it's about the creating a culture where people feel seen, valued, and inspired. And that's another thing that connects to your purpose. I'm re-listening to this going, oh my gosh. And business success is usually about trust, purpose, and genuine care. And a couple of the takeaways that I have from the book, one is that people perform better when they see their path, but when it's connected to their personal goals. Two, leaders who, and this is one of the things that inspired me to write an article later on this week that'll come out later this week, is that leaders who listen and show genuine interest into building stronger relationships are generally the leaders that have the most power. And I mean that in a good way, a good positive power over people. And you don't have to suck it out of them. It just comes out of them. And then the third takeaway I have is that turning employees' aspirations into benefits or something to benefit everybody benefits the business, it benefits the team, it benefits the individual. It's look for love and everyday passion and purpose, and then connect it back to what you do within your business. That creates a dream within the business. In other words, instead of asking me where our bottom line is, find out about the people. The people will find out what your bottom line is. And two, if there's something you don't know, by going and asking the people, they will tell you things that you may not even see in your own business.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
What?
Yeah. And so I would tell you that in the last year, the customers that I've been engaging with, the conversations are based. First of all, the clients that have come in place, some of them are new, some of them I've known for years. First is that established relationship of trust, because they know I'm not just here just to blow smoke up there, but I'm here to tell them here's a solution that may work for you.
Yeah.
The second thing is through all the engagement, we talk about quality, we talk about on-time delivery, we talk about supply chain, we talk about the capability of my team in Europe, and we talk about capacity. You know what we never talk about? We never talk about price.
No.
Because that's not, it's all those other things that are important to my customers and it's important to me. Now, and of course, my team back home, we're back in Lithuania, they're going to do their due diligence to make sure that they get the best product at the best value, because they want that customer to engage them at at in with all factors in consideration.
Yeah.
But the initial conversation, price never comes into play.
No, and it shouldn't. All right, so your turn. I want to hear a book. Give me a book. I've uh pick one. We talked
Okay.
about two, and you can drop in the second one.
Okay. So I would say the first one that actually I was turned on to this book by our friend Dolores Townley, Million Dollar Habits by Brian Tracy.
Okay.
So I follow Brian Tracy on LinkedIn, and it's really a nuts and bolts book. I have it on Audible, and when I go walking, I listen to it over and over again. It's more of a mindset of I was telling you earlier before we started. One of the things that I took away from that book is before you go to sleep at night, write down. That's the one. Write down very simple notes, like what's tomorrow morning. What are you going to knock out? What's the low hanging fruit? What's the long term? Just knock that out. And so, what happens, if I remember correctly, the way he says it, is that you already programming your body and your brain that when you wake up, you have this stuff that you're going to knock out. So I get asked all the time, and we joke about the fact that they say, "Well, Adrian, you're on LinkedIn all the time, or you're at this place. You must, how do you have that such high energy?"
Yeah.
And I say, "Oh, I have clones." But really, what it is, it's a matter of time management, of taking care of the things that are important. Um, People think, well, you work for a company in Europe, that must be hard. Really, it's not, because luckily for me, my boss Alexander Kumar, he and I, we're both night owls, and so I can be online. Oh, and we both, not only are we night owls, but we both get up early. So I can be online checking on some stuff. I will send him a message on Teams
Yeah.
at 11:30 or midnight, and he will answer. And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to work on this," and they're like 7, 8 hours ahead. And so he has a whole day to work on my question. So when I log back on my computer at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
I can see a message from him that he has an answer for me, and so vice versa. So um, the ability to be literally having my project worked on around the clock is very beneficial for me. So
No,
I knock out those things in the morning, and then if there's something that I need to do, whether it's network in the afternoon
yeah.
or networking at night, then I can do it.
No, and it leads into one of the things that I really want to focus on too is, like, we just talked about trust and clarity and how it is important to build trust and clarity within your customers, within your client base, heck, within your own personal life. Those are two pillars that you must have. But how difficult it is, because you're a great guy to ask this. How difficult is it in this remote type setting?
It can be difficult, and you have to be disciplined. You have to have the right tools in place. I've got two mobile phones, and I use them a lot.
Yeah.
I try to stay connected, um, and I carry my little book with me all the time. I have
Oh,
notes here. I have a note for for my regular 9 to 5. I have, when I volunteer with Cup of Joey, I have stuff here. As you know, I'm a board member for Tech Fest Live with Khalil. That
right.
happened, and so and then my free time, quote unquote, I help the local Veterans Chamber of Commerce. And so sometimes those activities overlap, sometimes they don't. If I'm doing some business with a customer and they mention something about veterans, I make a little note and I get back to them later saying, "Hey, do you want to engage with a veteran?" The other night we had a veterans uh, B2B mixer, and so I went through. Our friend Julie Strickland had a NASA Tech Talk at the Ion
Yeah.
Thursday night, and so I
Right.
stayed for that. After that, I took a quick shot over to Pinstripes and went to the Veterans Mixer and started talking to people. And the members of the. I'm not a veteran, but I support them. They asked me for their help. One of the veteran officers, he says, "Hey, I want you to meet somebody. I think you should connect." And so I go and connect with her, and turns out she's an artist. And so she says, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a manufacturer. I work for a manufacturer based in Europe." And so she was kind of confused why John wanted me to connect with her. And he said, "Well, Adrian, he knows a lot of people, and he knows people down Clear Lake because she moved from your part
Hang
of
on a second. Can you hear me? You're breaking up. Well, that's a, this stuff happens when you're on the internet. So, Adrian, if you can't hear me, or if you can you hear me?
I can,
Like that was a
I can,
perfect, because
I can,
I
yeah.
had you, it paused on you with your nose, like you holding it like this. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave it like that. That's hilarious.
So,
I mean,
I don't
that
know
would
where we
happen.
dropped off, but I met this woman, this artist
Yeah.
at the mixer for the veterans, and so she mentioned the fact that she does community murals. I said, "Community murals?" I said, "You know what?" I said, um, "I'm part of an organization that does STEM, and I think you would be a great addition to our event." I said,
Mm-hmm.
and so I told her about Tech Fest Live. She's like, "I want to do that." So the next day, I talked to Khalil and I got them connected. And so there's a good chance that at Tech Fest Live coming up in November, we will have a community mural, and she will direct all the
Nice.
participants to create a mural based on STEM, or if you want to add art into it, STEAM. So it's just a
Yeah,
matter
yeah.
of always being conscious of your of who you're at, where you're at, and your priorities. And it's not easy. I'm not. It's not
No.
easy, but it can be done.
No, and Khalil's one I need to get on here very soon.
Oh
As a
yeah,
matter of fact,
yeah.
I dropped the message. Like, let's do a quick reset. This is where I'm a little bit behind it, but I'm good. I don't like I we just go with the flow. And when I've got Adrian on, I'm just going to go with conversation. Look, today is my 13th podcast. What makes you tick? And it's an authentic, relaxed, purposeful conversation of trust, clarity, and traction. Why? To help incorporate purpose in what you do and impact the life of yours and others. Sharing business and personal stories is how we do this. Building a culture of trust, creating clear, impactful message as a leader with insight on how to build traction within your life. Today's guest is a gentleman I've known for a while, Adrian Leal. And you talk about trust. I trust this dude. This is one guy I trust. And it was kind of, one of the things, and I always say this is, and I said this today, I'm in education. Right now, I'm in education. By the way, if you're looking for a good business development guy, love to have a conversation with you, because I would love to be able to do that next. But one of the things that I always look at is the positive opportunities. And even with me right now in my classroom, I might be the only positive energy that my kids see in a day. And I want to be that positive energy no matter what. They may not remember what science, I just want to use science. I just want to use biology as a vehicle to help them understand the world around them, but really to relay a positive message and positive energy. So those are things that you have to have as a mindset. And those are things that you have to have to create positive opportunities. They may or may not come. You don't control that, but you do control your mindset. You do control your energy. And for me, that's one of those big things. What about you? I mean, as far as mindset, how has it created, helped you? Because you and I have a very similar mindset. How has that, or give me an instance where that's helped you create a positive opportunity?
Okay, so it's so I'm going to tell you, and you probably know. So I'm going to tell you about a very negative situation that I
Mm-hmm.
think the mindset created a very positive situation. So I talked earlier about you and I. We hang out at the Rockets game, right? So we have a very good friend that works for the Houston Rockets, Dolores Townley,
Mm-hmm.
um, who does an amazing job for us
Yes, she does.
organizing events. So yesterday, she she sent me a text, and it was a picture of a young man who was missing, and it turned out it was her nephew. And
Yes.
so I sound like, oh my God, what happened? She's like, well, he's 20 years old and he's been missing since Wednesday, but because he's 20, he can't be an Amber Alert. And so, and of course, in the Amber Alert, you have, you know, cell phones go off
Correct.
so I said, and so her and I were chatting. I said, well, let's use our connections. And
Mm-hmm.
so my mindset at the time was, let's use the available tools we have of social media to get the word out. And so she posted, this is my nephew. He's been missing around the Dallas area. I posted the exact same picture, but my post was different. I actually tagged people in the Dallas area, and I tagged people who are in, first responders. And so today we were talking, because Dolores has a very extensive network, online. She told me that she had, for those people who know all the LinkedIn analytics, she had 6,000 impressions in less than 24 hours,
Yeah.
and 4% of those were in the Dallas area. I had this morning, I had almost 4,000, and
Hold on. You had 4,000, and now you've got that face like you're choking on tres leches. There you go. All right, you're back.
I had 4,000, about 4,000 impressions, with 15% of
Yeah.
those coming from the Dallas area. So we shared the mindset that we're not going to let this be a negative situation. We're going to take something positive, and we're determined to have this be a success. So,
Yeah.
thoughts and prayers to Dolores' family, but it was a negative situation, and but the mindset of taking what we have available to us and use it for good, we put it into play.
Right. No, and I did the same thing. I was part of that post. I made sure that we took care of that post and got that out there, because look, you may have 10,000, I may have 5,000, somebody else may have 2,000, somebody else may have another 8,000. So we're at 25,000 just on 5 posts right there, just within our
Right.
own network.
Exactly.
No, and that's good. And prayers with Dolores for sure. And hopefully things will come out good with that, and things will work out. But it's one of those things where, for me, also being persistent to achieve a goal. Like right now, my kids are gone. Well, I know I was kind of thinking something you said as far as a positive outcome. One of the biggest things, and we talk about mindset, we were always talking about mindset as I was coaching, and I understood it, but it never kicked in until I went through my divorce. When I went through my divorce, it was one of those things where you hear about all the horror stories, you hear about everything that the kids, being a single dad, be a single mom, all this, people talking about how they hate their exes and blah blah blah. I was not going to be that, but it was one of those opportunities where it was it's something negative in my life, and as a family guy, it was something that made a huge impact. And it's always one of those moments. Go back. One, I chose to make my mindset and to grow from that and be able. I started reading. I started exercising. I wanted to make sure that I was the positive energy. Going back to the same thing, it's funny because it's changed who I am just simply by making a different choice and choosing to look at what I wanted to do. It also led me into being able to be persistent, and one of the goals that I wanted to do out of that was, a couple of years later, I ended up getting a job, which was with Gordon's. Knew somebody, made a contact, they gave me a shot, and I guarantee you they had questions about, because I had no experience. And it was one of those things where I did well at the job. I'm not going to say I was the best salesman, nowhere near. There were a lot of other people, but it was one of those things that I was persistent in what I did, and I was able to get people on through trust, clarity, and traction, of course. But building that trust with people is what made it different. And it was one of those things where I had the divorce that I'd gone through. I got over that obstacle, led me to this. I decided that I wanted to be a sales. I had a lot of new stuff I learned, got over that, and was able to grow. And all of that has led to this podcast and different things. What about you? I know that's one of my stories. What about you? Something that, you being persistent, you overcame.
So, in the role of business development, uh, you are engaging clients that uh, we call whales, right? The big catch, right?
Yeah.
And so you always want to have that one big catch, And I in my previous job, I had a customer that he had a problem with his device. It was a very unique problem that on paper there was no solution. There was no
Hmm.
solution. Um, but we had a relationship of trust, and that I had established working with him in a previous company when I provided equipment and service to him. And so I kept talking to him, and I said, let me understand what is it that you need? And he's like, well, I, I just don't think, I'm not going to. There's no solution. I said, no, 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 no. I said, Tom, there's going to be a way. And so I said, just let me. I said, let's just talk about it. Let's just, he kept, he was like, he wasn't sure. He already had a vendor who was doing his electronic assembly. I said, look, let me have the opportunity just to do your rework.
Hmm.
I said, you can't. I said, your rework is not going anywhere anyway. It's sitting there in we call it the boneyard. I said, you have your it's in the boneyard. It's money that's going to be lost. Let me take a shot at it. I said, I've got some people that I work with. I think we have an idea. And he's like, okay, well, can you tell me what the idea is? I said, well, it's kind of hard to explain because it's never been done before. But I think we have the right people and the right equipment in place to do this for you. Okay, so he trusted me. He agreed to give me this opportunity, and so took it back to my team, and the guy who's in charge of operations, brilliant man. He's like, I have an idea. He goes, this is how we can do it on a piece to piece solution, but for mass production or for mass repair,
Yeah.
we're going to do this, this, and this. And what do you think? And I thought about what his proposal was, and it made a lot of sense to me. And it had never been done before, but it made a total sense to me. So I went back to my client. I said, look, I said, for the short term, to prove our process, I'm going to give you X amount of repair devices so you can go and test them. And so, and he's like, okay. So he came back and he goes, yeah, this works. Your repair does work. I said, okay. I said, now we're going to wrap it up. So we went from doing just a few, small POs of, you know, ten thousands, of dollars of repair work. He was so satisfied with our repair work and the solution that we came to him.
Yeah.
He moved the entire production to us, and so that was the very
Wow.
first $1 million contract that the company brought in, and it was because um, we my client trusted me. We were clear with our solution,
Yeah.
and then once we got the solution, and we started off with repair, the repair gave us traction enough to go into full production.
God, you basically did what you said you were going to do. Just give me a shot,
Yeah.
and I can prove. No, that's awesome. Okay, so let's flip that when somebody else was persistent, and let's before we go to our next reset, tell us about Jin Woo's screwing stick.
Yeah, that while I was riding on drinking my water.
I timed
But
it perfect. That's why.
so in my career, I've held a different variety of roles, including a field engineer. So
Yeah.
I used to work for this company, and it was we had our product, it was an X-ray, some research equipment that used X-rays, and we had our product all over the world. There was a handful of us that were the field engineers that covered all of North America, and so I had a client at Thomas Jefferson Hospital up
Yeah.
in Philadelphia. Her
Yeah.
name was Jen Wu, and so this equipment, so basically, it had an X-ray tube, and the X-ray tube. There's two types of X-ray tube, and this one, the uh, it had a filament that blew out, and so in the manual of the equipment, there are very specific instructions on how to replace the filament. It involves a lot of things. You've
Hmm.
got to, you have to drop the vacuum. You got to shut down the power. You have to remove a panel. Make sure no debris on the O-ring. You've got to use, gloves for the oil for your fingers. It's not any contamination, but the instructions are there. And so Jen Wu called me and she says, Adrian, I need you to come fix my machine. Okay, so first of all, it took us a while to figure out what's going on. So I
Right.
did a quick troubleshoot. And I said, Jen, your filament's out. It got to be replaced. Oh, will you come? I said, no, Jen, it is, I think it was I don't know, like a Wednesday afternoon. I said, Jen, it's Wednesday afternoon. I still need to go home and pack. And hopefully I'll get a flight tonight. I said, but if I don't, that means I fly tomorrow morning, and I'm flying from central to east, which means I won't get there until the afternoon. And I know you go home by 4 o'clock, so it's going to be at least 2 or 3 days. I said, how about I show you how to replace the filament? Oh no, no, I don't. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I grabbed my phone and I literally sat on the floor in the lab, and you have to visualize the whole operation. So
Right.
I'm saying, okay, go to the toolbox. Well, what's a toolbox? So I explained to her, there's a box over there. Has a bunch. I said, okay, now you're gonna get a screwdriver. What's a screwdriver? What does that mean? I'm like, oh no. I said, okay, look. So think about it. You have to explain to a woman, first of all, who English is a second language,
Yes. Yes.
who
Yes.
has
Yes.
several PhDs, who's a brilliant mind in the
Yeah.
world of X-ray diffraction, but does not know what a screwdriver is. So I described a screwdriver to us. This is pre-internet where there's no Zoom or
Yeah.
Teams or. So I
You actually have
explained
to
to
use your
her,
words.
yeah. So she's like, oh, and of course I know what color the screwdriver is, right? Oh, I see it. I see it. I said, now look at the tip. Is it kind of pointy? Yes, yes. I said, okay, we call that a Phillips. Why? I don't know why it's called a Phillips, but that is your Phillips. So Phillips screw and stick is a screwdriver. No, no. Okay. You know what? It's a screw and stick. You're fine. We're gonna take that screw and stick. So I said, okay, now we go to the machine. So we go to the machine. So I had explained to her the old, I talk about, loosey lefty, righty tighty, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
so I showed her how to install the screw and stick into the screw,
Hmm.
and turn the screwdriver the right direction to remove
Yep.
that
Yep.
panel. She had to do it 4 times. It was 4 sticks, four screws,
4 screws with the
uh,
stick.
with a screw. And so it took me 4 hours to do this whole operation, which had I been on site, it would have taken me 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Yeah.
However, I eliminated the travel time. I eliminated her wasting, because she gets 2 service calls per year. I
Yes.
eliminated her using a service call on something very minor. I educated her on tools.
What a screwing stick was. She
For
knows what a
screw
screwing
stick,
stick.
I was so the good thing was I was now her go-to field engineer
Yeah.
for everything. The bad thing was I was now her engineer for everything. So
She was
so
persistent.
yeah. So but it took patience, and you have to, again, it's the mindset of think as if somebody had never seen a toolbox or a screw and stick before ever in their life, never had to turn a screwdriver,
Yeah.
into a screw, So, but luckily, she was patient with me. I was patient with her. And when I left that company, she's like, "Oh no, nobody to help me no more." And so I like, you know what, Jen, here is my home number. You ever have questions, you can call me. And actually, she did. About six
Wow.
months later, she called me and just to ask a simple question. And and when she called the office, everybody like, "It's Jen Wu. Find Adrian."
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Look, hey, we've only got about another 10 minutes or so left. Actually, we've got less than 10 minutes, but like I want to thank all the listeners for my 13th podcast and what makes you tick. Adrian and I are having an authentic, purposeful conversation on trust, clarity, and traction. If you have any questions, we've got about 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes left. We'll run. If you have any questions or anything, please drop them in the comments. I see James Cunningham dropped in. Thank you, James, for dropping that in. Um, Adrian, one of the takeaways, two of the takeaways I have so far are the 3 milk screwing stick, or I guess you put them.
You put it together.
No,
Three
look, I mean
milks.
that's what this is about. Telling stories and how trust and clarity are so important. I mean, clarity is extremely important. But one of the things that and we'll skip a little bit ahead. Uh, I'm always with me working with the youngsters, and you bring up clarity. I think one of the things that I want to make sure we make an impact is any advice that we can give to our kids. And clarity. I think sometimes we let our pride get into what clarity truly is. Whereas if we just stop for a minute and ask the right question, or like this the screwing stick. I mean, we'll laugh at that, and I may now start calling my screwdriver a screwing stick because that's pretty funny. But it's one of those things where, even just the clarity, you had to ask questions to understand where she was. But as far as dreams, and I think we still have a lot of dreams, and one of the things that I would really love to make an impact on our youth is to take what we're doing with Cup of Joey and be able to put it into purpose. I don't think we do that, and I think if we could do that in the education system, I think I'll say this on this podcast until the day I'm done with a podcast, is I think we miss that as a society and as an education and as parents. I think we are missing connecting our kids to our purpose the way that we should. In other words, help them discover it and then connect to a path that leads to the dreams. And I think those are things that we can make their dreams come reality. But if you were going to give advice to someone younger generation on their dreams, what would you tell
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for the younger generation, I think when it comes to their dreams is, I think, in my opinion, their dream is very connected to who they are, who
them?
is
Yes.
Bryan, who is Adrian. It has a lot to do of our actual essence. How we were born. I
Yes.
think it also has to do with how we grew up. I was telling you, my career was affected by watching my dad, who, by the way, was also a Catholic deacon, and so I saw him integrate his ministry in his job. Sometimes he'd be at MD Anderson, doing some work, and he'd get a call and say, "Hey, Deacon Leal, there's a patient over at Memorial Hermann that's looking for prayer." Well, my dad's like, "Okay, well, I'm at work, but give me 20 minutes," and he'd
Mm-hmm.
go into his briefcase, pop it up, pull out his Roman collar, and go and pray with somebody, and then put it back on and go back to work. I got to work with him during like summer break and Christmas break in college and high school. And I got to watch this. I'm like, wow, that's kind of
Wow.
cool. So I think when it comes to dreams, first you have to tie into who you really are. Who are you? Where what makes Bryan Bryan? What makes Adrian Adrian? And
Yeah.
then once you tie into that, you can have a dream that may be far fetched. It may be in your young life that that's impossible. There's no way I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
But going back to that book I was saying about the by Brian Tracy,
Yes.
Million Dollar Habits. If there's a dream or a goal that you want to achieve, write it down. Look at it often. and say, how do I get from point A to point F? And then, you know, a lot of times, your your journey that you want to have is going to be journey that is going to be very different from the journey that you will encounter. Um,
Correct.
we were at I was at Cup of Joey Friday, and Nick Radford with Persona AI gave this
Hmm.
really powerful short sharing with the group there and saying, you know what? He says, sometimes you have a dream, whether you're a startup, whatever. He goes, and sometimes you're going through hell. You're like, why, what's going on? Why am I doing this? You know what his advice was? To keep on going,
Yep.
just to keep on going, just to
I had
keep
that
on
same
going.
conversation with a friend today.
He goes, and if you want to bring in even, spirituality, sometimes, like, sometimes when life gets really hard and you fall down to your knees, that's where you need to be, on your knees, asking for some kind of guidance. And so that's the youth today, I think, they are tied into lots of electronics,
Yeah.
onto social media, onto instant gratification. Oh, I got so many likes. I got, when it's the
It's that.
one on one.
So they passed that law.
Yeah, I saw that.
The
Yeah.
how okay. So what I'm seeing now in the schools, but versus last year was my first year back in education in 7 years, and when I was there, we didn't allow phones at all. In between classes, the kids were on their phones. It was quiet. They're walking. It's like the old movie Dawn of the Dead where they're coming up.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was like. This year, now that they can't, now granted, you still have your ones that you have to pull from because they're still going to do, they're going to listen there, but they're going to push the limits.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they are actually having conversations. My tardies are up this year because kids are late for class because they're having conversations. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I know. That's awesome. Look, we're almost out of time. I want to go through. Let's see, we've got just a couple minutes left, Adrian. Anything? Two quick things. One, any leadership advice? The biggest thing that you would give on leadership? Just quick advice.
Never stop learning.
Deborah, no, you're correct. And going back to your story, the one thing when you're down, the one thing that I've always learned is that when you're down, instead of going, woe is me, what are you beating up for? Ask the question, what am I supposed to learn? What are you teaching me here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Depending on what your faith is, if you have it or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just ask, what am I supposed to learn?
Yeah.
And then the last thing before we go, you've got like a minute and a half to tell the International Day at Daughters Daycare story. The International Day at Daughters Day. Can
Oh
you
yeah.
tell it in
So
a minute?
when my daughter was little, I had her at a daycare, and it was International Day, and they had a sign that said, "Okay, parents, write down how you say hello and goodbye in your native language."
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I worked at Summer Jane Sugarland, of course, Summer Jane, international. So I walk in, and I see all the different hello and goodbye in, in Chinese and Russian and Arabic and everything. So I go up there and I write howdy and see you later. And so and I did that. I go back and pick up my daughter. Mr. Adrian, you did not follow the rules. I'm like, what rules? Our board. It said to say how you say hello and good morning and goodbye in your native language. I said, I did. But no, aren't you like Latino or Hispanic? I said, I am. I said, but I'm from Houston. What about your people? It's like acting going on.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
told you I'm third generation Houstonian. I'm also seventh generation Texan.
Yes.
And so I said, look, I said, I'm from Texas. My people do not cross the border. The border crossed my people. Oh, so you're from Texas? I said, yes. Okay, we leave it up. You say howdy and you say see you later. So that's who I am.
Oh, that's so great. Love it. Look, please connect with my show. I'd love to have you subscribe to my What Makes You Tick Pulse newsletter. Adrian, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I'm on there. That's the only social media I'm on is LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. I love to connect people to other opportunities. There's a post I put a while back about my life as seen through as a circuit board. And so find that, you'll see what my thoughts are.
Yeah.
I see myself as the solder on a community of a circuit board. So shout out to my friend Naomi Romero from Mexico, who figured out that I'm the solder. Yeah, I like connecting people. I like to solve problems.
Love it.
I like.
No, that's awesome. And you mentioned earlier about Texas ingenuity and European innovation in the U.S. market.
Yep. So that's, being in this industry for over 30 years, I don't see problems. I see opportunities. And working for a European company they are kicking butt when it comes to manufacturing. And so
Yeah.
I am that bridge. I will, any ideas I will throw to them, and they will tell me, yeah, that's possible, or maybe we just go back and talk to the customer. So that's what I'm doing. So being a subject matter expert in the world of circuit board manufacturing, I embrace that. But I don't just sit back on my previous accomplishments. I'm always trying to find out new ways to do things and what's the technology drivers in my industry and what are the technology obstacles.
Good. Naomi says hi, by the way. Look, my friend, it's always good to catch up. Thank you for being a guest on What Makes You Tick.
Enjoyed it, buddy.
Thanks, man. Look, let's go out today and make an impact in the lives in our community through trust, clarity, and traction. One of our favorite sayings is be transitional over transactional. You can find my friend on LinkedIn to stay connected with future episodes with me. Reach out to him for any conversation. Adrian, look, it's always been amazing. Please find my friend and connect with him. Thank you, guys. See you.
Hey.